Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back here with Unmuted. And of course, it's great to be back for another episode. Now, if you're listening to this on Spotify, I'm very excited to say that this is now be available on YouTube. I'll be bringing the podcast there with video feature if you want to take a look on average here. So last week we went to the introduction, the pilot episode, if you will, of this podcast and looking into why it's here, and we went over some stuff we're going to do. Last week I mentioned something that we're going to be talking about in depth today, known as Team ENDALS, and of course my campaign for race to 338. So why this started? So reason we looked into this was the matter is that before you can get anything passed, at least in Canada, I mean, even think in the United States as well, you have the FDA before certain treatments and drugs can be approved. So when you're looking into treatments and drugs to get approved, you need the FDA in America. In Canada, it's called Health Canada to approve these processes. And when we were looking into this, because as soon as my dad's diagnosed, my family looked into, well, there are a lot of treatments out there, yet it doesn't seem they have that much access here into Canada. So really what we were trying to do is look into Health Canada, and we've actually seen, if you look onto the website of one drug company known as Neurone, and the company's name is Brainstorm, so the treatment's Neurone, but the company's Brainstorm, they've actually come to Canada in 2017. In 2017, they have come to Canada and wanted to start their trial process for Neurone here. If you don't know Neurone, I highly recommend check them out if you're an ALS patient, because I think you'll want it here for how well it's worked. Right now, it's actively used in Israel, and it's free for Israeli citizens, but it's very expensive for non-Israeli citizens to come and get this kind of treatment. And of course, they wanted to have their main base up here outside of Israel into Canada. And they wanted to try and make sure it came through Canada. Since Canada, for some reason, we're still looking into why that Health Canada decided to either just not respond or reject this amazing treatment. So they went to the United States, and I'm going to do another episode on the coming up in the near future on the FDA's decision on Neurone, because boy, did that get my blood boiling. But today I want to pause. This is going to be a positive note episode. We're talking about Team ENDALS and the campaign Race to 338. I started Team ENDALS about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And since then it's grown from 3 members of parliament to 19. We had 20 before the federal election, but I'll get into that a little bit later today. So we had the people that, starting to grow into this movement and seeing that we need more approval before anything can happen in Canada. You need the federal government to pass drugs or treatments before they can be distributed out for the provinces to decide to use them. This is where healthcare becomes very confusing in Canada, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who just don't really understand. They think it's a federal issue, but then when you start getting into it, it's actually provincial jurisdictions or even municipal jurisdictions that need to be involved in this as well. It's very confusing, and it's like the RCMP or a lot of government agencies that have multi-layered jurisdictions. And I'm not really here to get into that, but this is the reason why we have gotten to this point where we needed a team of politicians and members of parliaments and the provincial parliaments. We haven't reached out yet. I can say I can't reveal any names because we haven't talked yet, but there is works of connecting out to Ontario. They're called MPPs, members of provincial parliament, and of course in British Columbia we have talked to some MLAs. It's been disappointing how some have decided to either ignore us, or when we talk to them they seem to have no real interest in what we were talking about, which is super disappointing. But huge, big news, maybe even possibly within some of the leadership in some of the parties here in British Columbia for the parties there. It's very exciting. Of course, I can't reveal any names because we haven't confirmed anything yet, and I don't want to put people on the spot. So right now we have already confirmed 19 members. As I said, it was 20, almost 21. So I'd actually like to give an honorable mention out to the two people who got unelected, who are on the verge of either one becoming on to Team ALS and one who did a lot of work with ALS while they were a member of Parliament. And so I'll start with James Cumming because it was so awesome. He came to a walk for ALS on Parliament Hill. And he was so ready to become part of this movement. And I really encourage James to continue that work, even if he's not elected. And we were just about to talk with him, be part of Team End ALS. And then, of course, the general election happened and kind of screwed a lot of things up for this campaign and Team End ALS as a kind of movement. Because we were, and I still say these people are the people who are on it, which I will share their names here. I just need to make sure I have it here. I'm just getting my list together. But while I'm looking for that, I'm just going to continue to, go on. And then so the other was Tamara Jensen. I actually worked on Tamara Jensen's campaign. I also worked on, for a little bit, Philip Lawrence's campaign. These are two great NDALS people. Now, I know for Tamara Jensen, there were some people who, I guess you could say she had debatable... I'm coming at this from a very neutral stance, and so she had debatable, or maybe not debatable is the right word, but people that could have different opinions on issues that she took stances on, and of course those are some of the reasons people either did or didn't vote for her, didn't vote at all, which is a shame. For you take little pocket reasons not to vote for someone when they have done amazing work elsewhere. And Tamara Jensen, I'm so sad she's not a member of Parliament today, because she was on the verge of doing some amazing work for ALS. I was working with her office when she was a member of Parliament, and we were going to her office was hopefully going to put out a right to try for certain drugs not approved by Health Canada, and giving Canadians ALS the right to try drugs. And it's a shame we couldn't get that out. It's a shame she couldn't, and of course it was on the table of the election. So for those who don't know, when an election is called, any bills that have not been signed in consent just die. And so when they die, it's kind of problematic. It is problematic. And it's just an absolute shame, and it's so sad. I'm so sorry Tamara isn't, but I know I'm same with James Cumming. Tamara, I just also, if you happen to be listening, which hopefully it does reach you, I just encourage you, continue on, fighting on with ALS issues. I know it's not just the privates, or it's not just the public sector. It's going to take private sector influence as well to get this kind of stuff done. Before we can get anything done, though, we need Health Canada to approve these kind of treatments. So that was the whole point of me starting ALS Action, Team End ALS. I was about to say ALS Action Canada. That is a different organization, which I absolutely want to have on here because they have done amazing work. They've actually given me the paperwork to actually get given me kind of the paperwork for the framing of what we need to see on a national level from our governments. And they've also been very supportive of a petition I released last summer. And I will get into my petition challenge and my disappointment and failure of that. But before we go on, we'll probably talk about that next week or the week after, and how we need to start up, and how that disappointment / failure led to this exact thing that we're doing right now. Before I get into that, I'd like to go over the members of Team ENDALS. So I'm going to start with the very first one, who was my member of Parliament, and that is Carolyn Finlay. She's done amazing work with ALS, and I was so glad she was when I was her constituent. My parents are still her constituents, and she still continues to do amazing work with ALS there. And then the second, of course, was Todd Doherty, now my current member of Parliament, who is continuing to do amazing stuff with ALS. He's part of the AZ, one of the co-chairs of the ALS caucus. Not to mention, he also does amazing work with mental health by trying to bring in an emergency helpline for those suffering with mental health or contemplating suicide. 988. I highly suggest you support that movement as well. I'd love to have Todd on here sometime in the future to talk about that issue, because that's an issue I have felt has been muted, not just in general, but even it seems the federal government attempted to kind of mute this issue a little bit as well, in my opinion. Feel free to disagree if you'd like. Of course, Bob Zimmer, who's a riding over from Todd Doherty, and I just love him, a great friend. He's been doing so much work. I've helped been part of a few letters with Bob to the Minister of Health. And definitely going to go over the change of Minister of Health and the previous Minister of Health and the last government, and kind of the failure of the previous government on healthcare, and how we can even use the pandemic as the example of how the government could have done a lot better with health, and how we were robbed of a truly good health minister for partisan reasons. Dane Lloyd, who is also a friend of mine and who's been doing amazing work in Alberta for his constituents on the federal level, but just another great advocate for ALS as well. And I think I'm just going to list them off because there are 19 of them. A lot of them aren't actively, or I shouldn't say overactively, doing much on a day-to-day level with ALS, but I want to say that each of these people has committed to fighting ALS, especially where it counts, which means when a bill comes to the floor, they're going to want to get it passed as quickly as possible, and they're not going to be the ones to be fighting this, and that's exactly what we want. And it's going to take time, and these are great people who are ready to take the fight. So I'm just going to list them off after Dane Lloyd here. So we got Jeremy Patzer, Brad Viz, Arnold Bierson. I will say something about Arnold Bierson because he is someone who's really helped us, his office, get our petitions going. If you haven't, we're going to try and get them up again this year and after Christmas and the new year, and try and get as many out in a year as we can. Arnold's office has been amazing with that and getting our petitions are out, and hopefully he'll be able to read some soon. We have been sending off to his office, so thanks again, Arnold. You are absolutely amazing. And also I advise you check out Arnold's work with human trafficking as well, because that is definitely an issue I'd like to have Arnold on as well in the near future to talk about that. We also have Ted Falk, Damien Kirk, Leanne Rude, Robert Kitchen, Tom Kimmich. Tom Kimmich is a guy I really want to have on here one day because he's really into the drug pricing here in Canada. It's also called the PMPRB. This is the major issue, a big challenge we're going to face because these treatments are expensive. But if we're not ready to fix the issues with PMPRB, then it's just not going to be affordable for Canadians. And Tom is doing amazing work with that. I'd love to have his ear more on the drug pricing because that's something we really need right now. Richard Bragdon as well. Jeremy Patzer has been doing work as well. Garnet Janis is amazing. I'd advise you to check out his podcast on opening up debate. Resuming Debate is his podcast. I highly advise you to check it out because it's about reopening and having debates again in Canada. I do highly check it out. And Michael Cooper, amazing. He was so quick to jump on board this movement, and he totally on side with us, which is awesome. And of course, finally, Alex Ruff. Alex Ruff was my most recent entry. He's a veteran, and really a big number of people who get ALS are people who are veterans, which in my opinion should be the last people to begin dealing with this disease. But Alex has done amazing work. He is one of the first guys who took our petition and put it in his office for his constituents to sign when they come into his office at home. And he took it and he shared it. I think he joined, I can't remember, Alex can correct me, I think he joined ALS or the ALS caucus, but he has been on point. He is, absolutely on point on this issue, and he is taking it very seriously. I commend Alex, and I continue, MP Ruff, you continue your hard work, and I'm so glad that you got reelected in the House. I'm glad all of you got reelected because you all frankly deserve it. And I'm just so happy. And oh, I forgot one of my apologies. I guess you could say best for last. Rachel Harder, amazing work in Lethbridge, and truly someone who just wants to help people, and her work shows. So what is this for? I guess you could say. We went over the 19 MPs and the two who got unelected and weren't able to join, but I consider them still part of the movement, just not on our race to 338. Last week I went over that in minor detail, and so I'll go over it again in case you didn't listen to the first episode. I advise you check out the first episode and then come back and we can get more detail into why we're going over what we're going over. But so there are 338 ridings in Canada, and in my last one I said that's probably going to change with a riding redistribution, which if you don't know what that is, it just means every 10 years Elections Canada will change the borders based on how the populations have changed, which means we can have more ridings or less, or some provinces can get more representation, some get less. It's up for major debate on how fair the system truly is, and that's not the point of this podcast. Maybe it can be in future episodes if someone really wants to say how that issue is being muted. I'm pretty sure I've had someone send me a message saying they want something on the West being muted. Maybe 100 episodes in or something we'll talk about that, but right now my prime focus is ALS and of course other bigger social issues, and I think that are right now about Western Eastern divides. But I mean, hey, still an issue that's very important, and maybe we can get to it when we get the important stuff out of the way. But right now, we'll talk about it. But anyways, so right now there's 338 ridings, and our goal is to get all 338 members of Parliament on this team. That way, when we don't even have to waste time debating, we just get bills passed unanimously. And that way, there's no infighting. We don't have to sit and waste time debating. We get it passed, get it through without any form of debate, any form of wasted votes that we know something like this would possibly pass in the House of Commons. So these 19 MPs are so far the only people to reach out. Or not reach out, sorry, but they're only to accept my invitation when I reach out. We have had some struggles with other MPs to not have gotten back to me. Unfortunately, some of these are even people are on or even co-chairing the ALS caucus. So it's quite disappointing on that regard. I'm so happy people like Todd Doherty, Tom Kimmich, who are on the ALS caucus and who are getting this stuff done on their own levels and doing stuff proactively. And people like Carolyn Finlay, I have to actually commend Carolyn Finlay again, because when I was her constituent, I brought this issue to her. About 2 months later, she informed me that she was joining the ALS caucus. And I think Alex Ruff said the same thing when we had our meeting. He, and I helped him or at least get him the papers to get on the ALS caucus. So, I mean, these are MPs who want to see this change, who want this issue dealt with, and finally start to see some solution here in Canada, which is what we really, really need. And so if we are going to continue to fight ALS on this battle, we need the federal level first. Because I've had some people say, what's the point of getting parliamentarians? What's the point? Why don't we just try and work with Health Canada? That statement kind of makes me laugh, because Health Canada is a bureaucracy. They're bureaucrats. And the problem with bureaucrats is they won't do things unless there's a benefit for them. And as I've told many people, and I'm sure, the people who've dealt with me, I've told this many times, if there's one agency that should never have a bureaucracy, and don't get me wrong, I'm against bureaucracies in many ways and many reasons I won't go over right now, or probably not on this podcast. But when we look at the bureaucracy behind, it's just Health Canada is one thing that should never have a bureaucracy. And it's something we have to fight in Parliament, because the agency of Health Canada will not do it on our behalf. So we need our elected officials to force their hand by creating legislation that allows these processes to happen. Now, unfortunately, there isn't really the ALS guy in the House of Commons, yet. And I'm hoping very soon we get one to champion this issue for the thousands of Canadians this is clearly affecting. Yet, since we don't have one, we now have to do this kind of work, which is the whole reason we started this podcast. And I need to restate, Team END ALS is not just a government thing. Looking for private organizations. We're looking for politicians. We're looking for public figures. We're looking for celebrities, whatever you can name. Team END ALS is not just the 338 members of parliament. We're talking branches of all governments. We're talking businesses, organizations, just influencers and people coming together, realizing this is a problem that's been muted, a problem that has been put on the back burner because it hasn't affected enough people. And if that's how we're going to treat issues, it's how we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. And basically what ALS has become is, and to be fair, I don't really blame people for this because that's, what happened to me. That's what I did, right? I didn't care about the issue till it affected my life. And now, that I've kind of been open to this issue and see how many people it truly affects. What we need to do is now say, well, sure, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't mean it still can't. This is something that could affect you down the road, in the future, or tomorrow, right? Or it could have already affected you. You might not know it yet. And so what we need to do is make this issue so well known that when it starts to affect you or affect future people that couldn't care less today, my goodness, we've already created solutions for it. So they don't have to sit here and say, now I need to advocate for it. And so, that's the whole point of this kind of podcast, doing that work so it doesn't become a hassle for people later on. And so it's well known that people don't have to freak out and essentially be bearers of bad news. We need to do more. That's the whole point of this Team END ALS and Race to 338 campaign. And, the biggest thing for us in this campaign is really making MPs realize this is an issue that's affecting thousands of Canadians. And I guarantee you have hundreds of constituents that are facing this issue. When I was door knocking in the last election, I helped out two candidates, as I said before. Philip Lawrence, who is part of Team END ALS, and such an amazing guy. This is a guy who after talking with him, he was on board of starting a letter, getting this going. Same with Arnold Viersen and Bob Zimmer. All these guys just wanted to get on it, get a letter. And we got so many MPs wanting to sign the letter. It's disappointing. Some of these MPs are pretty resistant to meeting with me about being on this team because it is important. And sometimes the hardest thing is getting by your staff for an MP. And if there are any MPs listening, I advise you, any stuff with ALS or any issues like this, tell your staff to bring it to you, because sometimes your staff won't. And believe me, I've worked for MPs, and I've worked, and I've had to work with other staffers, and not all of them do their due diligence to work the best. Now, I'm saying that's the majority or all of them, but there are those staffers who will block these kind of things, block these kind of meetings, because it's just work for them. And I don't want to put down staffers at all, because I was a staffer, and my habits as staffer was you help people. And I was so honored when I worked with Bob Zimmer to have that ingrained in me, is to you help people no matter what. It doesn't matter if they're even your constituent. You help them because they need help, and that's what people like Bob believe they're there for. And that's why I totally love people like Bob Zimmer and Todd Doherty, Carrie Lynn Finlay, because their whole thing is not, I'm just going to help my constituents, and that's the borderline of my help. I'm helping people because there are people across this country that need my help. And same with Philip Lawrence. We have had people, when I did work for Phil, and it was an absolute pleasure. I worked for him on his campaign. I worked in his Ottawa office for a year. And when we had people coming to us from border ridings because they didn't feel they were serviced, so our first, priority there was we help people. and his staff was absolutely amazing in doing that as well. And I was happy to help them out in that regard as well, to help ease the burden of over a lot of stuff coming in. But it's still an amazing MP. Philip Lawrence and his staff, and I gotta say his chief of staff, Greg Rowden. I have to give him a shout out as well, because he is fantastic, frankly. And I think a lot of chiefs of staffs and managers for MPs should be a lot like Greg. There, he's done amazing work. I just have to give a shout out to these MPs and their staff, because they are doing what they can to help. Now, I understand, and I think we all have to understand that MPs can't do everything. But you don't realize how much you do by just saying, yeah, I'm going to support you when I can in this. That means a lot. And I think a lot of people are unappreciative of a lot of the work our members of parliament do. I understand that's a very diverse opinion. Some people think they sit there doing nothing. As I can say, working for a few MPs, that's never the case. They're actually quite busy. And I will defend the job of a member of parliament, because I've had to sit on the sides of seeing an MP work. And at least the MPs I've worked for are very hardworking and do what they need to do to make sure not just their constituents, but just Canadians and people they need for their own passions and issues get done. And they're all amazing. All 19 of these MPs I've just listed are amazing. Check out my social media on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram to check out these MPs in more depth and what they've been doing, because I do share that every time they start to take example of this. But there are some of the 19 who go beyond on this issue than others. And, of course, you're always going to find that and see that with certain issues. Some will take initiatives a bit more seriously, but all of them, I must say, are taking this issue very seriously, and all have committed to battle ALS the best of their ability. But the most important, they're committed to fighting ALS in the House of Commons with their votes, and that's the most important thing we could really ask for. Don't get me wrong, that is super important. That we should never ever downplay the importance of a vote in the House of Commons. And I know this episode kind of turned on to a bit more of an issue of MPs, but it's still a very important issue. And this Team END ALS, and I mean, if you want to support it in the future and see it grow, then let your MPs know that if your MP is not on this list, then go to my Facebook and tag me and tag your MP and say, get involved. Because I think a lot of people don't realize the influence that an average person can have is very downplayed. If you go to your MP and say, this is an issue important to me, I want you to see this guy. If he emails you, answer it, because it's important. And I know not every MP is going to really answer this call, but the goal is to get 338. And if there's people resistance to it, well, let's get people in there who aren't resistant to this movement. Let's pass this issue unanimously. Let's pass treatments unanimously. Let's pass, when a cure comes along, let's pass that unanimously. Let's not sit around waiting for people to do. Let's stop waiting around for the right person to do something and just do it ourselves. Because if you want to see change, you got to do it. You can't be sitting there hoping that the Lord Almighty is going to bring down the right person on a burning chariot to all of a sudden fix our issues for us right here and now. Sometimes we have to take up the sword and just do it. And we can't really just rely on the perfect person coming around, because we have to be the change we want to see. And if we sit here on our hands doing nothing and sit complaining, that is even worse than the people doing nothing in power. That might be controversial, and I don't really care, because frankly, it's really the truth. But support movements like this, like what we're doing now. I encourage you to create your own podcast channels. We want as much of this as possible, and that's the whole point of this podcast, is to create a bigger, broader sense. And I'm so happy I'm getting this on YouTube now, so it's another platform that we can be streaming out and getting open here. And I just hope that we continue to share this kind of work and movement so we can build towards this no longer becoming a muted issue. I want this podcast to be canceled one day because it's no longer needed. That should be the goal of this kind of work. Hoping it gets canceled because we don't need it anymore. And I want it to come to that point because it should come to that point. I want this over, and hopefully sooner rather than later. But what we have to do is continue to work together to aim to that goal. Because the only way we're defeating ALS is together. And how we do that is so important, and that's we stay united on this issue. Now, I know we're hitting the half-hour mark, and I know this episode may be a little longer than I wanted it to be, but going through those MPs took some time, and I wanted to reflect each and every one of them because they're all doing amazing work, and I'm so happy and so proud to be working with such amazing members of Parliament. And I encourage you, if you know organizations, you know people, influencers, groups, or anyone who wants to be part of this team, we're open to anyone, any country, anywhere you want to be part of the team. I'd be happy to say, welcome to this person, because that's what this team is building influence and building. But right now our prime focus is campaign Race to 338. Because right now, what we need most of all are members of Parliament to get this passed so that Health Canada just does what we need. Not what we want, what we need, which is more treatments, which is more access to cares, updating our hospitals. I really like to go deeper into healthcare, which is we'll probably talk about in some time in the next few weeks about how Canadian healthcare definitely needs a boost. I mentioned it in the last episode a little bit about how it needs to be spotty. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, which I know some of you probably are, then you won't get to see my first episode. So I advise you go check out Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because it is on there to get a gist of what this is about. And of course, if you're on Spotify and you want to actually see a video of what we're doing here, then go check it out on YouTube, because these videos from now on will be on YouTube as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But as I close here, because I probably should, because it's getting to a point where it's going to become too long, and I'm sure enough people are tired of hearing me talk anyways. So I guess in closing, what we need to think about is, how do we continue to grow in this movement? And it's work like this, advocating for these kind of issues. You have more influence than you think, and never doubt your own influence. Because you could somehow connect to some very powerful people. You might not even know it. You don't know your people around you, so say something. Say this is an issue important to you, but most importantly, go to your member of Parliament. Now, for my friends in Prince George and Surrey and Langley, we already kind of have some of those areas covered. Well, maybe not in Langley, actually, since we lost Tamara Jensen. But to my friends across Canada here and to my listeners, reach out to your MP. If you're American, reach out to your congressman, congresswoman. To make these demands that the FDA, Health Canada, our governments need to start doing more and bringing in these treatments, because we absolutely need them. And for the survival of these thousands of Canadians suffering in Canada right now, we need these treatments. And the only way we're ever really going to move forward with this is if we pass this kind of work. So please reach out to your MP if you haven't already. If you have, and about this issue and they're on board, let me know. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and of course Twitter, and and start tagging myself and your MP in the same thing. And if you want your MP to be part of Team END ALS, which I know you should want them part of Team END ALS and want them on board on this race, and we're not even close to halfway. We're back under 20 because of the federal election, kind of ruined things for us. I want to get us over 20 again. I want us to be, by the end of the year, I would hope we at least have 40. And so, that's what we should be striving for. That's my goal. Keep looking out for my Facebook page as well for new petitions, new movement, new posts, new members of parliament who are joining Team END ALS. I can tell you we got a few people that we've already reached out to and hoping to hear back soon. And I'm just really excited to continue doing this advocacy work, and that we have more platforms now reaching out to. Now that we're on YouTube, you're going to be on YouTube officially, and now that we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, I'm just so excited. And I'm so excited to be fighting for the muted issues, turning off that mute button, and bringing these issues to light. So, as I close here, let's continue fighting together, and join me every week and make sure that we continue to turn off the mute button. Thanks, everyone, and have a great week.